welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. It is a yearly tradition for me to get together with ESPN's Mike Clay, who I think that your actual title is NFL senior writer, but to me, you are the projection wizard. That is how I look at you. You have your projections out with the Vikings now knowing who their quarterback is going to be. So we always get together around this time in the summer, go through these projections. I always enjoy this. And what's funny is you're usually more accurate than me when it comes to thinking about how these guys are going to end up producing at the end of the day. So we got a lot to go through. You have a very intriguing target number for the Vikings fullback, CJ Ham, that we have to break down in depth. I actually really do want to get into the kick returning stats because the kick return is back, baby. But Mike, I mean, this project that you do every year with these projections is absolutely wild to me, and how accurate you are with it, how good it is in terms of the depth chart, like even your offensive line, I think is correct for the Vikings and who's playing left guard. How much time do you put into this, man? It's wild.
All of the time. That's how much time. It's nonstop. I get asked that question a lot. And, it's not like there's a day one that I start it. It's year round. This thing evolves every day of the year and never, the one season ends. And as soon as, for example, Minnesota is eliminated, whether it's after week 18 or whether it's in the middle of the playoffs, I update everything for next year. I get the IR guys back on the roster. I pull the free agents. All those kind of things are adjusted. And it's just constantly a living document. So, and then of course there's a whole, I go down in the off season where I study league and team trends, coordinator trends, all that stuff, because you have to tweak things, right, to figure out what kind of the baseline is for the NFL and for these players. So, it's just a long ongoing process. It takes a lot of time, just kind of going into the cave, if you will, and getting to work on this stuff. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's, especially this day and age, whether it's you play fantasy, of course, that's where I kind of started in this industry, whether you're an NFL fan, and now betting too, just making sure that the lines make sense. I mean, I've learned a lot from studying player props over the last few years, which has improved my process, because you realize that, a lot of people look at these numbers and they say, wow, that's a low number. That you're way too conservative. These numbers are too low. And then you compare it to the props that are out there, and you're like, actually, you're not low. You're kind of high. This is telling me to go over a little too often. And honestly, season-long player props usually do go under. So I've learned a lot of that, and that's why you'll see a lot of blanket injury rates across the NFL, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But it's a lot of work, but it's fun. I'm a sports nerd. I'm a football nerd. I love doing it. So I'm just glad I get to share it with everybody.
Well, you're the only person in the world that has a sack projection for Jerry Tillery. So I think if anybody's looking for that, this is the place to go. But it's obvious where we have to begin this conversation, Mike. As far as your projections go, you think that it's JJ McCarthy. I mean, you've got him starting 14 games this year, and we're going to ride this roller coaster throughout OTAs, minicamp, and into training camp of the quarterback battle. And I think the Vikings do want to be patient with JJ McCarthy, but I would not count out at all him just straight up winning this job out of training camp, beginning the season, or Sam Darnold plays a couple games. It's not that great. They decide it's time for JJ McCarthy. But how did you kind of settle on he's going to be the guy in year one?
Yeah, so I do track the status of especially first round quarterbacks year to year, and I just have an ongoing sheet for going back over a decade, just to get an idea of when they start. Essentially, when is the quarterback room turned over to them? So, there are examples of guys that wait. Trey Lance, behind Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously Jordan Love was one. I think he's the only one that didn't play a snap his rookie season in the last 12 to 15 years. But for the most part, these guys are under center, especially early first round quarterbacks. If not week one, by like week four. It's Jared Goff wait until week 10. He's one of the exceptions. He's one of the only early first round quarterbacks that didn't play like right away. So I do expect McCarthy to get. There's a reason they took him. I expect him to be under center very early. I think that maybe, and I did hedge a little bit here by like one game, I gave Sam Darnold an extra start more so than I did like the backups for other teams like Washington and Chicago. But I think it'll be quick. You might see Sam Darnold. Maybe they give him week one, week two. He has a couple good plays, couple turnovers, and then they're like, all right, we got to make the change here. We want to win some football games. So yeah, I do think the odds are McCarthy starts 13 to 15 games, maybe all of them.
So the date that I was looking at on the calendar for them, if they do want to start Sam Darnold, was after the bye week. So the bye week is week 6, and then they play Detroit
Hmm.
after that, which is not the easiest matchup for Detroit's offense, but their defense historically has not been super scary. Maybe a little bit improved this year, but I think that's a position that if they don't start him right away, they might wait. But the beginning of
Hmm.
the season also could pressure Kevin O'Connell. I mean, you go from the Giants, a winnable game, to San
Hmm.
Francisco, Houston, Green Bay, New York Jets. If it doesn't go well in a couple of those early games, then they could end up going to him, or he could just win the camp battle. This is what's so difficult. Now, when it comes to projecting actual performance, so say that he does win the job pretty quickly and he's out there, your projections, I think, are fairly, I mean, of course, you're going to try to kind of play it safe here with a rookie when you have no idea, but 3,500 yards, 19 touchdowns, 13 picks. How do you settle with this? Because with Kirk, it was easy for you. Just pull up Pro
Sure
Football
was.
Reference, look at his page, and be like, okay, somewhere in the middle of all that. Much more difficult with someone like JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, he was one that I just did an article where I was looking at player props for rookies, and then I just filed another one that'll be up on the NFL page at ESPN. Just that goes, I do it every year where I just look at rookie projections for each position, offense and defense, and his came out kind of high. His projections are actually high for a rookie quarterback, and relative to the other guys, Caleb Williams is ahead, but in terms of passing yardage, he's ahead of the other guys. So part of that is my optimism with this scheme. I remember I actually wrote a piece. And look, I don't think anyone's shocked. McCarthy went to Minnesota. I actually wrote a piece for our magazine that'll be out in a month or so for fantasy, where I said something along the lines: "Will JJ McCarthy have a big season in the great, Kevin O'Connell scheme, or something along the lines?" I wrote that before the draft. I just expected it to happen, and I was excited for it to happen because I think it's a really good fit. And a part of the reason for that is when Kirk Cousins went out last season, the Vikings were mid-pack in QBR the rest of the season with their backup quarterbacks. And that, sometimes it's easy for these play callers to put up big numbers with a great quarterback, or even a quarterback like Kirk Cousins. But then you see them get tested when a backup comes in, and some succeed, some fail. And we saw Kevin O'Connell succeed for the most part last season. So I think they'll still lean toward the pass. It's not like they invested a ton in a great runner or anything. A lot of times Aaron Jones in Green Bay was just used as a pass catcher. So that makes me think they are going to lean a little toward the pass, especially once he's comfortable. And I believe in the efficiency of Kevin O'Connell offense. So those are big variables for me and give me optimism that McCarthy could put some decent numbers up. And again, I know you might see those numbers and think, they're kind of low, but they're good numbers for a rookie quarterback. Don't get it wrong.
Well, I think Kevin O'Connell is just going to pass the football no matter what. I mean, he's going to
Hmm.
keep pushing the pass button until he's sort of forced to run the football. We'll get to Aaron Jones because your projection's interesting there. Let's say that I told you, hey, Kevin O'Connell came up to me in OTAs, whispered in my ear, Darnold's going to start the whole season. JJ's not ready. How would you have gone about projecting Darnold, knowing his past history, but also knowing how different his circumstances were in Carolina and with the New York Jets than they're going to be here?
Well, what I would do is ask you if that really happened. I would like to know if.
It did not. It did not. When none of us, I don't think that they have any
Are you
idea what's
breaking
going to
news
happen
here?
yet. No,
Yeah,
I'm not.
yeah. I would maybe give Darnold one more start if you told me that. Like I don't. We've heard that before. We always heard like these guys are going to wait. We're not going to rush them, and then it's like week 3, and it's not just the top quarterback struggling. Sam Darnold's probably not going to be great. He bounced around the league for a while. Has been a backup. He's been so up and down. He's had his moments. A lot of these guys that are career backups have had moments. It doesn't mean he's going to be the long term answer. And not to mention the pressure from the media, the fans, the other coaches, management, ownership. Like, there's going to be a lot of pressure. We took this guy in the first round. Let's get him on the field. So I think that wouldn't really change much for me. I somewhat agree with you that maybe week 6 is interesting if Darnold comes out and has a couple good games to start the season. He did that in Carolina that one year, came out really strong, looked good, looked like they finally figured something out, and then the wheels kind of fell off. So it's possible. But again, with that schedule, that first month or so of the season, I don't know if there's a lot of wins on that schedule. If they're 1-3, 1-4, you got to take a look at this guy. He's super young, but as we're going to get to, this is a tough division. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team this year unless McCarthy really is the real deal and shows it right out of the gate, which could happen. We saw it with CJ Stroud last year. But I think it's a rebuild year. It's a year where you put McCarthy out there, let him learn some things.
Yeah, I guess to rephrase, if McCarthy was for sure not going to play, and we knew for sure that Darnold was going to play the whole season, I mean, for me, if I was doing that projection, I'd go with something like 4,500
Gotcha.
yards, 30 touchdowns, and 22 interceptions or something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I think that Darnold is super talented, but he's also a wild man when it comes to playing with the football.
Yeah, I got you now. Okay, so I misunderstood. But yeah, I agree with you. A lot of turnovers, no doubt. A lot of passing because they're going to be trailing and they're going to have to throw the football if Darnold's your starter and is turning it over that often. But honestly, in terms of overall offensive efficiency, I don't know if it moves the needle a lot because, again, you don't expect really above average efficiency from your offense with a rookie quarterback. So it's not like I'm projecting this offense like, well, they have McCarthy, he's a first round pick. This is going to be a top 10, top 5 efficiency offense. It just doesn't happen. It's super rare. I mean, I think even Houston last year was like, were they 12th in QBR or 12th in offensive efficiency, something like that. And that's in a like one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen from a quarterback. So there's no doubt they're probably going to be outside the top 20 or so, maybe 25th or so in offensive efficiency, even if McCarthy plays the whole season. It's just the nature of the beast. It takes these guys a while to get going and be high-end players. They turn it over more. They're sacked more. They just, you name it. They just, the YPA is lower, completion rate's lower. It's just the nature of the beast with that position. It takes a while.
Yeah, the NFL is hard. It's hard to play football.
Yeah.
And I mean, with McCarthy, if he does start as much as you think that he might, then we're talking about a guy who has not thrown this many passes ever in a season.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to come along with a lot of pressure. I mean, if he had this type of season, 19 touchdowns, 13 picks, I think the Vikings would be thrilled with that because knowing about his age, and does that factor in for you? Because you've got a couple quarterbacks here. Bo Nix is going to start right away in Denver, and he's 24. And then JJ McCarthy is 21. So if he came in and just got to be 21 years old and had this type of season, I think it would really be spectacular for projecting out to the future. Where if Bo Nix has it, I'm not sure it's the same. Or do you not care as much about the age thing?
I would care more if Minnesota more aggressively addressed the bridge quarterback situation. I know that Darnold got a decent paycheck for a 1 year deal, but I don't. I the NFL has not given us an indication that they view him as a starting quarterback. You can't tell me Minnesota and I think part of why he got paid like that is because first of all they didn't know for sure they were going to get McCarthy. That was part of it, and also there's more investment in backup quarterbacks now in the NFL. We saw the most, I won't say ridiculous at this moment, but you could call it that if you want, the most extreme measure we've probably ever seen a team go to at that, which was Atlanta spending a top 10 pick on a quarterback after they drafted or acquired Kirk Cousins. So I think that's part of that. But again, I don't think you bring Darnold in like this is a guy that's going to take us to the playoffs this year. This is a bridge quarterback. So that gives me more optimism that McCarthy's, going to be out there and going to play quite a bit.
So on the running back position, I am very intrigued to see the split between Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. At the end of last year, Ty Chandler showed that he's got some special burst. He could be a playmaker in the run game and the pass game. It was also pretty clear that they were frustrated with some of the pass protection stuff. If you go and look at those PFF grades for the pass blocking, not so spectacular. And then with, even just getting some of the details of the offense down, I think that he's got to make some progress, but has the potential to be a starting caliber running back. Still, I might lean a little more toward Aaron Jones. Then you've got the injury factor. He got banged up last year. How did you weigh, because you have close to a 50-50 split with these guys. So how did you weigh some of the age injury stuff into Aaron Jones's projection?
Yeah, so 50-50 split roughly for carries, which I think is an important distinction here. We've seen Aaron Jones, for the most part, splitting carries in Green Bay for the last few years, and that was with A.J. Dillon, who by all means was not, again, objective measurements, was not an effective rusher. He had his problems. He scored touchdowns in bunches here or there, but he wasn't super efficient as a runner. Um, I think that last year when they kind of made that switch from Madison to Chandler, we saw a little bit more juice in the running game. And also, Aaron Jones turns 30 this year. I think that this is a guy that's going to be limited as a rusher. So I have him at 163 carries. I have Chandler at 155. There's obviously some injury baked in there for Aaron Jones. I have him at 14 games. So, week to week, maybe the gap's a little wider, not just like 50-50, but I could see like 57-43 with them mixing in Chandler. And that would be, 8 to 10 carries a game for Ty Chandler. So I think that makes sense. Now, where it really gets interesting is, like you said, passing situations, pass blocking situations. And as you can see in the projection, big gap there. I have Aaron Jones at 60 targets, 43 catches. I've Ty Chandler down at only 30 targets, which is just, normal. 1 or 2 a game off the bench makes perfect sense for a guy spelling the starter, not to mention perhaps a couple of starts if Jones misses time. So definitely more optimistic overall about the body of work for Aaron Jones. I think that you bring him in with the hope of at least getting one really good full season out of him. But I do, Ty Chandler should be the clear number 2. Right now it's Myles Gaskin. I don't, or it could be someone else, of course, but I think it's pretty evident that their plan is Jones and Chandler for the moment. Otherwise, I think you'd be more aggressive in addressing that position.
Right. They didn't go into free agency and look at another running back.
Right.
I thought that they might, but they decided to bring Gaskin back. He was there with them last year. I don't think he got an actual snap, but he was around. I met him. And behind that, Kene Nwangwu has pretty much only been a kick returner for his career. They haven't shown any trust in him. And then Dwayne McBride, they drafted in the 7th round, and he was on the practice squad. Almost impossible to try to project anything there. With Jones, were you influenced at all by how he performed down the stretch? Because this is a trap in football where, hey man, you look at that guy's last 5 games from last year, he was amazing. Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
I've learned over the years not to do that too much. But his last 5 games, Mike, they were pretty amazing last year in the playoffs. I don't know if that mattered to you or not.
Yeah. I probably would be less optimistic if he didn't come back strong last year, but also he missed another chunk of the season. So yeah, he came back with some fresh legs and had a couple of good games, but you're right. I was laughing though, because I thought it was funny the other day. Someone, of course I post these projections all the times, or, we do pods like this, or other blogs pick them up and they write about what's right or wrong about them, usually what's wrong about them. But someone did that with the Raiders, and some guy responded and was like, these are terrible. All you need to do is look at the last 4 games of the Raiders last season, extrapolate them, and add 5% better for the next year. That's it. It's easy. I mean, what else is there to do? That's a perfect projection process. Every team gets 5% better every year. That's just and you only look at a convenient 4-game sample. So anyway, I thought that was funny timing that you brought that up. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking, of course, at a bigger sample for Aaron Jones. This is a guy that hasn't had more than 4 rushing touchdowns in several seasons. He's had 1 full season in the last, three of the last 4 years he's missed time, usually significant time. Actually, that's a trend for his career, and frankly, a trend for running backs in general. So especially pushing age 30, this is a guy where this is an age where we start to see these guys fall off. I just can't imagine that he's going to be a featured running back. So I think if you're talking 170, 180 carries, and then again, like 60 targets, I think that's a good season for Aaron Jones. We get that out of him and then have a good change of pace back, and Chandler's fine in that role. That's going to be a serviceable backfield.
Yeah, and they've been so bad at throwing to the running backs out of the backfield since O'Connell took over. Their screen game has been just atrocious. And I don't know, was that Dalvin Cook falling off? Was that Madison being ineffective? Madison dropped the ball a bunch of times last year. He had never done that before. It was kind of strange. But Aaron Jones has been so exceptional through the years that even if he adds something there and then is an above average runner in 14 games, in 13 games, then you've gotten way more out of that than you expected. I do wonder if they get into camp and start looking at any running backs who are on their couch that are veterans that might want to come in. But I thought that would be the one that Vikings fans, I think, would read and be like, I think that's a little low. But when you look at his recent history and injuries, totally fair. Now, the wide receivers is where it gets kind of interesting for me, because obviously your Justin Jefferson projection, very high. He's extremely good at football. Jordan Addison had a very solid rookie year. After that, though, Mike, A little more dicey than before. I mean, with KJ Osborne, you could pencil in 45 to 50 catches, solid number three. We're talking Jalen Naylor, Trent Sherfield here, etc. What do we think of this unit as a whole? Like, you ranked all of the units as well, of course. I mean, as a whole, being so top heavy.
Yeah, so the way my grades work out is I'm ranking 1 to 32 and then kind of distributing it like a GPA. So I have them at a 3.0, so that would be basically a B, right on the money, borderline top 10 unit. And the reason they're that high is you have an elite number one, maybe the best receiver in the NFL, in Justin Jefferson, who had some big games even with the backup quarterbacks out there last year. So I was a little bit more worried about him without Kirk Cousins, and then I kind of rebounded his projection a little bit, going from Darnold to JJ McCarthy. So that helped a little bit. Big target share. He's gonna have a big season. Jordan Addison, a little nervous about him. I think he's he's going in year two. He should theoretically get better. His numbers were very much inflated by that big barrage of touchdowns that he had last season, which was somewhat a product of Kirk Cousins. He didn't really show up in a way that I expected without Justin Jefferson. His target share didn't really move up. We didn't see as much of a high end performance. And at his size, frankly, coming into the last year, his 40 time was a little bit concerning. So there's a couple things there that make me wonder just how good is this guy. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying, like, what is his ceiling? Is he going to live up to that first round pedigree? But still gave them a pretty good grade for that 1-2 punch. After that, though, wide open. I don't know. I mean, they don't. I don't know if they have an answer as at the number 3 spot right now. You mentioned they might go look for another running back. Don't be surprised if they address wide receiver. That wouldn't shock me at all, depending on how these guys show up in camp. Not to mention, guys are going to get, it could be a trade or something at cuts where they claim someone off waivers. Do they bring in a veteran like a Robert Woods, maybe, who will get left go almost inevitably by Houston at some point? So I know they have a lot of bodies here, but a lot of these guys have been around for years, and no one has established himself as a starter. And really, your top 3 receivers are starters now. So I'm with you. I think depth a major, major concern here.
They liked what they got from Brandon Powell last year when he had to step up into a bigger role, and he had
Mm-hmm.
never done that before. He had essentially just been a punt returner or a
Right.
screen pass catcher for a little bit for the Los Angeles Rams. Maybe there's something there. And I know that Kevin O'Connell is a fan of Jalen Naylor. It's just that it hasn't worked out. Last year, he got hurt on the first day of training camp. That set him way back. And then he got in the game against the Raiders. He gets hurt again in that game and then doesn't have much of a chance. Of course, staying on the field is a big deal. But if there's one guy that could surprisingly break out as wide receiver 3, it's probably Jalen Naylor, who they have liked what they've seen from, and yet he just hasn't had the opportunity to get on the field. With Jordan Addison, I think I'm probably a little higher on him than you. I mean, I think that there's an issue there as far as being a plus wide receiver in the league because of the size. It's just going to hold him back a little.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like he's 170 pounds and runs a 4.2, but the ability to make some high difficulty catches, track the football, route running, getting open. I think that there's a lot of talent there that he could. I mean, I think your projection is extremely fair. I mean, you've got him still making 70 catches, which I would probably say about the same thing. I think that there's a little more there. If there's 10 more pounds on his body, he fights through some physical contact. There were times last year where I thought corners were able to take him away a little bit, but I might put it a shade higher than you would.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I do something I look at with expected catch rate too, and his was pretty low last year just because he had a lot of high difficulty catches, and he still was above average in catch rate. Again, I think just from a statistical standpoint, though, people might be shocked about the touchdown drop off, but again, your big substantial change in quarterback. Not to mention just it's unsustainable. I do a lot of work on touchdown rates in the league for fantasy purposes, and he scored on almost 10% of his targets last year. It's just not something we see. I would say usually when I project someone's going to drop off in touchdown total, it's like a 90-95% hit rate. It's almost easy to do when these guys have extreme touchdown rates, and usually it's by 4 or 5 touchdowns, about cut in half when they're at the extremes like him. So don't be surprised if the touchdowns fall off, but catches and yardage wise, I'm almost identical to where I was last year's or where he was last year. So by the way, they didn't really address receiver. So they're committed to him as their two. He's going to be their clear two, and frankly, you might see even more targets early in the year as T.J. Hawkinson gets back to full health.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Because it looks as of right now, like at the very beginning of the season, we're going to see Johnny Muntz, Josh Oliver, Robert Tunyon is here
Sure
apparently,
is.
and so I think that's a pretty clear sign that T.J. Hawkinson is going to need more time to recover from his ACL, which of course could mean more targets for Jordan Addison if you don't have KJ Osborne here. So I want to go over to the defensive side. There's really only one player I want to talk about. Then we got to get into kicker, kick returner, fullback, and et cetera. The really important stuff here on the show. But
That's what I'm
Dallas,
here for.
exactly. Dallas Turner projecting a rookie sack production. I saw that your teammate at ESPN, Seth Walder, in his projections really loved Dallas Turner versus some of the other young pass rushers that were drafted this year. I think this one's a little tricky to figure out because they got Van Ginkel. So how are they going to, and Grenard,
Mm-hmm.
how are they going to rotate those guys? How many snaps should we really expect? But I mean, you look, he comes from Alabama. They have, a program there that's as close to the NFL as you can get on defense. And he was extremely productive there. How do we figure out an edge rusher and how many times they're going to take down the quarterback in a rookie season?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. This is going to be covered in that piece I just mentioned earlier, where I look at rookie projections. Turner is actually fifth among all rookies in sack projection at 4.2, and that might seem like a low number, but I mean, as I write in this piece, a little foreshadowing to this piece, a little preview. The most sacks by a rookie last year was Kobe Turner. He had 9. That was the 7th most by a rookie over the past decade. Byron Young at 8. Diaby in Tampa Bay at 7.5. Will Anderson had 7. Jalen Carter had 6. They were the only ones to clear 4.5 last year. The only rookies. That shows you the bar that you have to get to. And some of these guys were just forced into massive roles. I mean, Byron Young played like 85% of the Rams snaps last year. They had, I mean, I wrote about this last year, how worried I was about that Rams defense. Luckily, their plan was essentially, we have our starters and no depth. We're just going to put them out there and let them play like every down and hope we stay healthy. And they did for the most part, and it worked out. So, and they still were like bottom third of the league in EPA, with the exception of that one big game they had. So that's it. I mean, again, I'm not anti Dallas Turner. I've been playing 40% of the snaps, and the reason for that is I love their 1-2 punch. You know, for losing what they lost at edge this year, and to go ahead and get Renard and Van Ginkel is huge. I thought they got 2 of the most underrated edge rushers in the league. I thought it was really savvy and smart way to address it. That's not costing them a lot. And then you bring in Turner, suddenly you have a good core. So I'm curious to see how they get creative there with Van Ginkel. He's very versatile. Maybe that gets Turner onto the field more. But sometimes it takes these guys a little while to get going, as I just pointed out with those stats. So again, and by the way, you mentioned McCarthy's age. Dallas Turner, a couple months past 21. He's super young as well. Just don't be shocked if it takes a little time.
Yeah, and I think that he's in a situation where they're not going to have to say, "Hey, Dallas Turner, you play edge rusher for 875 snaps and get us 12
Right.
sacks," or this didn't work out. They can mix and match him, move him around, put him in pass rush situations and packages, and give him a chance to have favorable situations before he's taking on a bigger load into the future as he grows and develops. And just my observation from seeing him up close is that he doesn't look to me yet physically like he's at his peak physically. Like, I think he's going to get bigger, faster, stronger, all that sort of stuff. So you could tell from talking with you that you get a lot from fans where they think that you're too down on their team for
Mm-hmm.
just being realistic. That is a theme. But I will say the one place I would be more optimistic than you is the overall Vikings defensive ranking. And this is because of Brian Flores, and really Brian Flores only. Because if you look at the roster, you go, I don't see a whole lot of all-star talent here, a couple of good players, but the combination of Flores and mixing and matching players, I think can result in a little better. You have them in the low 20s as a final ranking, but talk me out of thinking that.
Yeah, so I'm actually looking at right now at their defensive EPA last year was 1.1. The year before is 3.5, so 1.1 means they were a little bit better last year. The year before that, they were 1.7. So it's kind of been a bit of a roller coaster for them. They remember 4 years ago, they had that really atrocious year. They were near 10, just to give you some perspective. So I have them at 2.5. So I'm kind of mixing the bag between this year and last year. I think that on paper, maybe not quite as good as I thought they were last year, and certainly you have some roster voids. You have some. It's kind of top heavy, I would say. You have some parts of this defense that are very good and others that are concern areas. Obviously, the strength is safety, obviously, with Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum. What a find he was. So they need some of these young guys, these early high pedigree day one, day two draft picks at corner to come around. I mean, they have the raw talent there. I mean, I love Shaq Griffin, but I don't know why that guy can't sustain a starting job. I feel like he's been so good at times, and he might be their 4 right now. They're number 3 on the perimeter for this year. So I think they have some talent at some places. We'll see. Off ball linebacker. I'm not sure if like Ivan Pace last year, he actually led all rookies in tackles. Like, is that real? Is this guy going to be a clear number 1 top end off-ball linebacker, or was that just out of necessity last year? So we'll see how that pans out. And then, I talked about the edge rusher up front, defensive tackle, definitely a concern area for me. If them ranked kind of low there, depth obviously a concern. You mentioned joked about Jerry Tillery earlier. That's a guy that has high pedigree, but has struggled to maintain a starting job in the league for a long time. So there's, like you said, there's some talent in some spots, but it's all relative to the other defenses in the NFL. I think they still have some guys that they need to really develop.
Well, and I think that the cornerback position specifically would be the one that concerns me the most, because they didn't go out and get some sort of big game changer at corner. And I think that Shaq Griffin maybe gives them an opportunity to play him at outside, move Byron Murphy inside a little bit more, where he's been better historically by his PFF numbers and so forth.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, if you're talking about going through this and you got, Deebo Samuel, Nico Collins, Green Bay throws the ball pretty well. Couple of matchups with Detroit, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. There's a lot of good receivers on this schedule that I think they could struggle against if, they don't get improved cornerback play from where they were last year. Now, let me switch over though. Well, did you have more on that?
Oh, I mean, the one thing I would say in their defense is they do have some, again, a lot of day 1 and 2 picks that if they could develop, just a couple of these guys, because the depth is there in that department as well. You also have Josh at safety who can play the slot as well. He's like their third safety. You move him into the slot and you have, even more depth at the cornerback position. He did a nice job for them they had 3 safeties play over 1,000 snaps last year, which you just don't see just because he was so versatile. So they do have options there. You just need to make sure some of them pan out. That's all.
I was laughing a little bit because, of course, your projection naturally for Harrison Smith in snap count is extremely high because for his career, he always plays every snap of every game. And Kevin O'Connell had mentioned maybe wanting to lower that a little bit, but I've also heard that from every coach for the Vikings for about 4 years. Yeah, we want to reduce Harrison Smith's snap count a little bit. And then they start playing the games. They go, no. He's still one of our best players. Let's keep him out there. The Metellus thing was a revelation, though, last year. I wasn't even sure at this point in the year whether he was going to be on the team. And then he ends up being, or if he was going to see the field at all. And then he ends up being a huge player for them. But the most important thing to discuss here is kick returning and the rookie kicker. Vikings fans. That's right. Extremely nervous about a rookie kicker, their history. You can imagine why. You've got Will Reichert hitting 84%, having a good season. I do think that this is probably the safest kicker pick that anyone could have made because he has this enormous sample at playing at Alabama under a lot of pressure. But rookie kickers have to be almost impossible to predict.
Yeah, it's tough. I just find a baseline for rookie kickers. I expect them to be a little below average because that is what we have seen. The only thing I would say here is the lesson I think we've learned with a lot of these, we'll call them high pedigree kickers, the guys that are drafted basically, is some patience. How many guys have we seen just come in, whether it's nerves, butterflies, just getting used to the pros, the regimen, the longer schedule, and they struggle, and then teams cut them loose, and they always seem to do better in the next place they go. It just seems to always be, it just happens so often, I feel like. So I haven't done a lot of work on that, but it just feels like it continues to happen, and I don't think a team knows that better than Minnesota, obviously, with what has happened to them at that position as of late, especially Daniel Carlson. So, hopefully he comes out and plays well right away. But again, don't be shocked if there's a slow start here. Hopefully they're just patient and they don't give him the hook after 10 games and sign a vet and move on, because that doesn't always seem to work out. But we'll see. I'm with you. I have some confidence in him. Still have him, attempting 33 kicks, making 28. That'll be a pretty good rookie season. You come out hitting 84% and most of your extra points, you're fine for year one.
Yeah, and I think that I looked at kickers who had more than 100 kicks in college and how they
Hmm.
turned out, and a lot of them did turn out to be pretty good kickers who were drafted that had over 100 kicks. And I think that if you have a kicker in college who has one big season, that can throw you off a little bit. But this guy had numerous very good seasons, so again, it probably as safe as you could get. But here's what I love looking at the projections. I call this up, and my eyeballs didn't go to JJ McCarthy first. They went to the kick return. This is something you follow me on Twitter. I've been tweeting about for years. This UFL currently
Hmm.
well, they're not doing it the UFL. The XFL kickoff. Just loved it when they did it. Nobody saw it because
Hmm.
it was the XFL. And the NFL finally decides to adopt it, which is going to result in the Mel Grays, the Dante Halls, the Tamarick Vanovers, the Josh Cribbs returning to our game. And I
Hmm.
think that Kene Nwangwu can be one of those guys in a very small sample, one of the best kick returners in the league. You've got him returning, and it's just spectacular. 60 kicks this year.
Yeah.
Let's go, Mike. This is great.
Yeah, so this was tough, and I did put some time into this, but there's some unknowns with figuring out how many total kick returns teams are going to have. And like the last couple of years, I haven't had to put much time into this because you knew that the balls are just going to sail out of the end zone most of the time. I tweeted about that months before they made this rule change. Like we got to scrap this thing. They're kind of like you. Like we have to change this. This is dumb. Like it's what are we doing? We're just sitting, we're allowing teams to score and then just kick the ball into the end zone, and then what a waste! What a waste of time. So I'm glad they changed this. Step one was kind of just looking at how many return, like actual kickoffs there will be. Obviously we know each team's going to kick it off at least once per game, but then the way I did it with projections is look at all of the after a touchdown, field goal, after the half, or at the beginning, add them all up. How many kickoffs will there be? And then come up with a rate for how many of those will be returned. And I did turn to some of that XFL data to kind of figure out how many were returned. And then I just had to hedge a little bit on that because I don't have much more information. We're going to learn a lot from the first few months of the season and go from there. So I have them with 75 kickoff returns, which of course there's going to be more kickoffs. Some of them will be touchbacks, probably a low rate of them. And then split it up with Nwangwu and Ty Chandler as the primary kick returners, because I'm very curious to see what that looks like as well. Are you going to have a primary kick returner? Are you going to have two guys back there that end up splitting them, or it's 60-40? I don't have that answer. I don't know what that answer is right now. So that's how I have it for now. But I also like doing this show because you give me some good information, so you can tell me what you think it's going to look like.
I think as long as Kene Nwangwu does get banged up sometimes, and he was hurt at the beginning of last year. If he's
Mm-hmm.
healthy, I think he'll be their main guy by far. I think I totally agreed with what you were doing. But when they did use Ty Chandler last year, he had actually a kick return for a touchdown that got taken back by a holding that was nowhere near the play. He's got
Mm.
the talent, he's got the explosiveness, and I don't know the strategy yet. We're actually going to talk this week to Matt Daniels, the special teams coordinator. But what we did see in the XFL was they started running some real plays there by the end, whether it was like different blocking schemes or reverses or different stuff. So I think teams are going to get pretty creative with this. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do use multiple people back there somehow. But I'm fascinated to see how this turns out. So before we get to the last thing, the big picture on this, I do have to ask about the fullback projections here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, CJ Ham, 2 attempts, 8 yards, 5 catches for 30 total yards receiving. I'm going to throw one thing at you. I'm going to predict one big play for CJ Ham this season. I'll tell you why. I did an
Okay.
article. I did an article on this last year, a very large article in which I interviewed multiple fullbacks for that Kevin O'Connell started on third down and longs using CJ Ham as a blocking specialist. And one of these times, he's going to sneak out and everyone's going to forget about him. And he's going to get 25 yards on a catch. That's my big projection. But I also think it's very fair to not have him as a centerpiece of the offense. It's just usually once a year, the guy catches somebody by surprise and has a big game.
Yeah, my only pushback to that would be you said 25-yard play. he had 25 yards all of last season as a pass catcher. So yeah, I was probably too high on him last year. I have him. He had 1 carry last year. I have him with 2 carries this year. He had 9 targets last year. I have him with 6 targets this year. So and those were lows for him. Big step back in his usage. One carry is a career low. 9 targets was his fewest since what is that? His rookie season when he's 24 years old. That was a long time ago. So I'm disappointed in you. I mean, or I'm disappointed in his usage. It's very disappointing. But how about that receiving line for his career? I'm just looking at it right now. 77 catches in his career, 635 yards, 2 touchdowns, also 104 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. But his receiving line for the whole year is not a bad career for a fullback, honestly.
No, it's true. And where the big difference is the last 2 years is that Kevin O'Connell just never used a fullback before.
Mm.
And they love CJ Ham, super high intelligence player. He was great in that role of filling in as a blocker, special teamer, leader, captain, all those things. They want him on the team. But I don't think that O'Connell until last year had a plan for him. Whereas when Gary Kubiak or Clint Kubiak, we know their history. They love the heck out of fullbacks, but O'Connell is probably not going to use him as much of a weapon. So it's fair. It's fine. I love that. That's my favorite part though, of bringing this up to you is you actually give a legitimate breakdown of that. Actually thought about the
Every
fullback
player.
percept. It's incredible.
I joke about that all the time. Yeah, third string tight ends, punters, fullbacks. It's all part of the package. I mean, if he gets 1% of the carries and 2% of the targets, those don't go to other players. So it matters in the big picture.
Well, speaking of the big picture, you've got this as being a little bit of a rough season for the Minnesota Vikings. Your win projection is around a 7-win football team, which is not super far away from where I had them in picking the W's and L's. I felt like I had to stretch a little bit to get it to 9, considering how difficult this schedule is. Do you see a world where you are surprised, where you at the end of the year, we have another conversation. You say, all right, man, I was wrong. This team turned out to be way better than I thought. Or you feeling pretty solid about this one?
Yeah, I mean, the way I'll be way wrong is if JJ McCarthy is just legit right out of the gate. Like if he's CJ Stroud and you're the version of CJ Stroud 2024 and he's just the real deal and he's clearly emerging as a top 10, we're talking about him as a top 10, maybe top 5 quarterback next season, then of course I'll be wrong. They should be pushing for a playoff spot in the NFC, no doubt about it. But especially at his age, it's hard to imagine that happening. You just have to think that they're understanding that this is going to be a little bit of a rebuild. We're going to put McCarthy out there. We're going to get him reps this year. We're going to continue to build this team up around him and play for 2025. So that should be their plan, I think. And a part of the reason for that is the division. The division is probably the best it's been in quite a while. The Lions are suddenly one of the better teams in the league. You mentioned their defense being a pushover. I think those days are over. They've been trending up. Honestly, for a while in terms of run defense, but their pass defense, it should be much, much better. A lot of investment in that secondary over the last year or so. Chicago, of course, the supporting cast around Caleb Williams is terrific, kind of quietly, like we talk about the big skill position guys offensively, but the defense is better there. The offensive line is better. The schedule, I think, is the easiest in the division for the Bears. And then, of course, the Packers were already, they should have beaten the 49ers last year. They had that game in their hand. They just blew it. They just blew that game. So, and they're still really good or solid on paper, we'll say. So that's the main issue here. Had Minnesota brought Kirk Cousins back, this would be a even more exciting division that I think any team could have won. Now I think it's probably a 3-team race, at least just for this year.
Yeah, the Chicago thing is a tough one to figure out because it's a rookie quarterback, but the rest of that team, especially the way Matt Eberflus has built up the defense, the Montez Sweat trade alone just seemed to be this big momentum swing where when we saw them at US Bank Stadium with Montez Sweat, he was dominating Brian O'Neill in that game, which usually does not happen. Is like this guy is a complete difference maker for that defense. And then they were able to bring back Jalen Johnson. They didn't have to trade him because of contract issues. They've got a lot. And it's almost like the Keenan Allen trade has not been discussed at all, but the Vikings gave up 18 catches to Keenan Allen last year. It's a very difficult division. And even the games outside of the division, usually if you got the AFC South, you held a party. Yes, you got the AFC South, but now it's Anthony Richardson year 2. It's, Trevor Lawrence. There's really no easy breaks on the schedule outside of week 1. and anything can kind of happen in week one. I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I have them with one of the 10 toughest schedules in the league. Part of that is, if you are a team I'm projecting on the low end, you're playing, within this division, three teams better than you. That's 6 of your 17 games are against, teams that are clearly, I think, better than them. So that's part of it. And you mentioned some of the other opponents on that schedule, especially early on. It's going to be tough right out of the gate. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that this is just a year. And look, I'm not a hater. I'm not biased against Minnesota. I've honestly been probably more optimistic. I spent a lot of last offseason defending their offensive line, and I think I was kind of on the right track with that. I just thought in general people thought they were terrible, and they had a lot of talent. So, at times I've been optimistic about them, maybe too optimistic about Minnesota, but I think this is one of those years, maybe a little bit of a step back, and then we get it going again in 2025.
Well, no, from my perspective, I think that everything here is more realistic than people want it to be. But at the same time, I think Vikings fans understand where they are as a team. It's a team in transition. It's a team with a lot of really good players and a lot of holes that they're going to need to
Mm-hmm.
improve. And when you have a rookie quarterback, you just don't know. I give the coaching staff some credit that this team will be in the playoff hunt, but much more than that would be, I think, overly optimistic. But I mean, look, we just believe in Minnesota sports teams now with the Timberwolves and
That's a
what
good
happened
point.
there. So there's reason to believe in everybody. Just Google Mike Clay projections. That's how I always find them. And Mike Clay NFL on Twitter, although it seems that everyone already follows you anyway. So there shouldn't be anybody it's a pretty big Twitter following that you've got.
Well, I don't know how many people are on that platform anymore these days. The engagement isn't the same as it used to be, but yeah, we'll do our best. It's still where I pump out the most content. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be an interesting season for sure. I already put my eggs in the New York Jets basket this year. I think they're gonna be a powerhouse. So that's gonna be something that's going to really drive my mentions this year. If the Jets are doing well, it's going to look good. If not, I'm going to be hearing about it for a long time.
I did notice you didn't give the Vikings a very high chance to win that game in London against the Jets, but we'll see. We'll see about all the things that Aaron Rodgers has done to his body, and if he can hold up there. So, but
That's the
Mike,
big X factor. Yep.
it's always great to get together with you. It's one of my favorite times of the year is breaking down these projections. So we will definitely do it again soon. We'll hook up maybe before the season and see where we're at and see how different things are at that point. So I really appreciate the time, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's always fun and love doing this again because I love that constructive feedback as opposed to, again, social where it's just like, is this guy mostly asking me if I'm doing the same medications that Aaron Rodgers is doing, something along those lines? Am I high? That's mostly what social is, but I love the constructive feedback. So if you're listening as well and you're like, man, I'm surprised this guy's like not projected for more snaps or stuff. I love that. Give me some actual perspective. That's why I feel like these are good because I'm constantly reading reports from you or talking to you or beat writers that I trust from other teams and learning things and constantly adjusting these things to make sure that they're a good resource for everyone. I'm not trying to be bold with these. I'm trying to be realistic. So stuff like this is a huge help.
Just take a little sip of that ayahuasca and open the PDF. That's what you do here. I really appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for the time, man.
You got it anytime. Take care.